we're starting a new section for justicelove.org, and we are having Ask the Experts. So we're sitting down with Kim today. Kim, explain to me, what is your expertise in sexual abuse?
Well, you know, just the normal average training. To get your LPC, you have to do some work in sexual abuse training. But I also did some work at a local nonprofit here, Mid-Coast Family Services. I was the family violence counselor, which worked with all kinds of abuse, sexual, family violence abuse between spouses, children abuse, anything that had to do with abuse. I worked with them on that. And then for a short time, I worked at the Juvenile Detention Center, and I worked with a lot of the teen girls and boys. And you can imagine they had a lot of problems, and a lot of them stemmed back to sexual abuse as well.
And how long have you been a counselor?
I have been in practice about 10 years.
And did you always know that you were going to be a counselor? Like when you were growing up, were you the person at the, high school party, you were out on the patio with one or two people, like solving all the world's problems?
I was the one that everybody came to with their problems and asked questions. I knew in high school that I wanted to do something in psychology. I let my dad talk me into going into education because he said they'll always need teachers. So in my first life, I was a kindergarten teacher for several years. Then I stayed home to raise my children for a short time. And at that point, I decided to go ahead and fulfill what I knew I'd always wanted to do, and went back to school and got my master's in counseling.
Isn't it easier when you don't really go to work? You actually go to work, but it's what you love to do, so the day just passes so quickly.
Absolutely. It's a big difference when you're in your element.
And do you, in your practice, being a hairstylist in my day job, not when I'm interviewing and speaking with survivors or now with experts like yourself, I get to know my clientele. Do you get to know, and personally, do you invest in them? Do you, when they go through something painful, do you share that with them?
It depends. You know, we're always told to watch what we disclose about our personal lives, because sometimes that can go into what we call transference, where the session can become more about you and your problems than about the person you're working with. But there are times that I disclose personal things that have happened in my life if I feel that that will be beneficial to my client, and sometimes it makes them more comfortable knowing that I've been through what they're going through.
Yeah, kind of like a mirror, a reflection.
Or that I have that understanding in a way that somebody else might not have because I've been through it.
So explain to me the difference between sympathy and empathy.
Sympathy is when you can have compassion for someone. You can feel sorry that a person has gone through an experience. Empathy is more along the lines of you've been through it yourself, so you have more of a greater understanding of what that person is going through, and you have that shared experience, and you can empathize and understand what they're going through.
And so in sexual abuse, lots of the survivors that I speak with, they do have empathy for one another. They've been in their shoes. They're trying to help each other. I think it's important that we bring this expert advice into the Justice Love website, because sometimes we have empathy and compassion, but we're looking at that person still as a victim, almost as though we're a victim and feeling their pain. How do you work through the stages of not being the victim and always the poor pitiful me? I understand your pain. Can you tell me your story over and over again? You know, I think empathy is an important part of life. You want to show some sort of compassion, but you also don't want to play a victim role. So how do you balance the two as a survivor?
Well, getting out of the victim role is part of the big healing process. And what I always explain to my clients is that as long as they're still a victim, the perpetrator still has power over them and control over them and their lives. And what we're at work to do is to take that power and control back and to no longer be a victim. And part of that healing process is coming to a place where you understand fully what happened, what it was. You forgive yourself for whatever the guilt or the shame, or if you felt like it was your fault. But a big part of it is forgiving the perpetrator.
So I want to touch base because many survivors do not know that they were sexually abused until they're adults. How is it possible to be a child and not know that you were sexually abused?
Well, A, if they don't know what sexual abuse is, I mean, they may remember the experience but not have seen it as bad or abuse, that that's just something that happened, or that's something that happens to everybody, and not even know the impact that it's had on them. Or in some cases, the trauma is so severe that they dissociate or they have repressed memories, and it's a way of coping so that when they are a child, they can't deal with the trauma, and so the brain takes over and kind of just buries it in the back of the brain somewhere. And sometimes it unlocks as an adult and sometimes it doesn't.
Do you believe that that what's suppressed or repressed, setting back in the brain, do you believe that it comes out in other ways? Is it why we see commonly now, I forget the statistics, 76% of obesity we know now have been sexually abused. 90% of incarcerated men and women have been sexually abused. You can take it back to drugs, a statistic, alcohol, a statistic, pain medication, over-the-counter medication. We constantly see women, it's very common, get in not sexually abusive relationships, but go on into physically abusive relationships. Do you think that's because of the truth that's sitting there?
I can say this, trauma always finds a way out, whether it comes out in the truth or it comes out in different coping mechanisms, whether it comes out in addictions, self-harm, like you said, getting into unhealthy relationships, abuse. It will always find its way out. And what counseling does is to help offer a healthy way for it to come out, to confront it, which is a big part of the healing process. You have to confront it, and sometimes that's painful, and that's where the brunt of the work is. But then you work through it, you process through it, you find healthier ways to manage it, and then it doesn't become a part of your everyday life anymore.
And so if someone called you and they were seeking out counseling, let's discuss. I know it's important. Most places take insurance. What if you don't have insurance? What's your other option?
If you're going to a place like my office, we either take insurance or it's private pay. Private pay can run rather expensive. The going rate is $90 an hour. But I know throughout the state of Texas and even throughout the country, there's a lot of nonprofit organizations that offer free counseling. If you're on Medicaid, you know, that's an option as well.
But you're saying cash pay is $90 an hour?
Yes.
Well, that's nothing. I thought you were going to say like $500 for your life.
No, $90 a week. $90 a session, which a session lasts between 45 minutes and an hour. So you're looking at about $100 a week, depending on how long you're in therapy. Some people can't afford that.
Well, that's true, but I'm thinking like that's for your life, an investment you could be spending in drugs and alcohol.
Some people don't want to spend $100 a week dealing with pain because it can be a very painful process, and they've worked so hard at burying it and not confronting it that I've had a lot of people when it starts getting kind of hard, they quit and they bail.
Yeah. I believe that there is a defining difference between a victim and a survivor. Many people don't know this about me, Kim, but you're not going to believe this. But I did when I first started therapy at 24 years old. I finally decided at one point in time, when you begin therapy, it's like refreshing. You want to start telling people you were sexually abused. Right. You know, you're like, you just let the bird out of the cage and, you know, everything underneath the rug starts coming out. And you're very proud of that, but it also begins to define you. And I made a commitment about 3 years into therapy. I started journaling, and I never told anyone else that I was sexually abused for 10 years. And I said, for 10 years, I'm going to shut my mouth. I won't play the victim role. This story will no longer define me. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I know it's the truth. I've accepted it. And then, of course, as you know, by the time that I was 36 years old, it became my platform, and I began to build JustUS out of it. So what would you say is the difference between being a victim and being a survivor? Many people don't understand that mentality, but it is two different mental thinking.
Absolutely. A victim is someone who is still stuck. They're still stuck in the pain. They're stuck in the trauma. They're stuck in the coping mechanisms that they've always used to try to deal with it. A survivor is someone who has worked through it, processed it, taken their power back, taken their control back. When you're a victim, the perpetrator still has power and control over you. That perpetrator is still affecting your life on a day-to-day basis. Once you become a survivor, that person no longer has power over you. You kind of make a choice to say, no more, I'm taking my life back. No more are you going to affect me through depression or addiction or all whatever troubles in life that they're having. They take their life back and they just say no more.
And I think whenever we say the perpetrator, speaking of the victim, the perpetrator has power over you, I hope we agree on this, that power, even though you're an adult, and this person may be deceased, they may have moved to 1,000 miles away, they may or may not have any be around you at all. But when we say they still have power over you, if you are using drugs and alcohol, they still have power over you.
They are still victimizing you.
See, victims don't get that. Victims think, I'm just calm. And I'm going to tell you something. Man, I don't want to get any slack over this. But what I've noticed about victims, they're very attention seeking. They're constantly sick. There is constantly an ache, a pain. There is something wrong with them. So when we say the perpetrator still has power over you, even though you're the one diagnosing yourself or you're the one seeking the attention, it's the perpetrator that's caused the problem and you're reacting at his control still. Is that fair to explain?
Yes, that is fair to say. That's, what I try to tell my clients is that if you are still suffering from this in any way, he may not physically or she may not physically still be harming you, but mentally, emotionally, relationally, if you are still having any harm, then he's still victimizing you. The perpetrator is still victimizing you. And it's about getting your voice, and it's about taking your power back. And a huge part of becoming a survivor versus a victim is the forgiveness process. When you say, I forgive you and I let that go, and I don't take another minute out of another day to think about you or what you did to me.
It's very difficult to make. I think the hardest part to make the transition, but it is a conscious effort. I'm going to choose to become a survivor.
It's choice has a lot to do with it. That's where it starts.
And then, man, once you make that choice, for me personally, I was so pessimist. Like, I was always hurt. I was always in pain. Everybody was always against me. Everybody was always talking about me. Nobody liked me, yada, yada, yada. And I literally had to reprogram the pessimistic me and lie. I love the fact that the word believe, I love the fact that the word believe has lie in it, because to be someone different, you have to fake it till you make it. And when I say fake it till you make it, I'm talking like, I'm the most awesome person, like writing words of affirmation down.
That's
You're
cognitive
journaling.
therapy.
Okay, well, I didn't know they had a name
That's
for
cognitive therapy, when you change the irrational thoughts or the negative thoughts in your head, because your brain will act to make true what you tell it or what it says. And so I have so many clients who say, I can't say that because that's not true. If you say it long enough, if you tell it long enough, repeat it over and over, the brain will work to make that true.
And it will become true.
Yes.
Yes. It really is. It really, I love to bring a little bit of God in here right now, because it really is true. It's an act of faith. Yes. It's saying, I am this. I am a survivor before it happens, and believing, even though you can't see it, believing that it will become true and manifest, and that's who you will become. But I believe it all starts with a conscious effort of, I am going to be a survivor. Which takes me into my next question. Is that a lifelong battle?
It doesn't have to be. It shouldn't be. If you truly work through the process, the healing process, you do the hard work, it should not be a lifelong problem for you. It should be like any other trauma that you've had to work through, whether somebody else has hurt you in some other way, not necessarily through sexual abuse. You have to work through it. And again, it's about making a choice that I'm not going to let this define me. I'm not going to let this define the rest of my life. And it doesn't have to be a lifelong battle. You can finally put it to rest and put it in the past where it belongs.
So if you have a survivor who literally has, let's call them a survivor, let's move forward. They truly are a survivor, but they still have to watch what they eat. They still have to watch their alcohol intake. They still have to watch their over-the-counter medication. It's very common that I hear from survivors that I'm just an addict by nature. I think because they picked up those coping mechanisms,
unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Yes, and they still, but you know, everybody needs an escape. I mean, right? It's okay to go out with your girlfriends and have a drink.
Well, yeah, it depends on the purpose behind it. If you're going out just to have a drink with your girlfriends and to socialize, that's one thing. If you're going out to drink to forget and to numb, that's a different story.
So if I have a binge day on Sunday and I eat everything in the house, that's okay?
You don't have to have been sexually molested to have a problem with food or any addiction. Do most sexual abuse victims struggle with addictions as a way to cope and numb? Absolutely. But it doesn't mean everybody that has an addiction was sexually molested or abused.
So it's important to create a healthy balance, regardless of what your past is, to have a healthy balance and be conscious and aware of the choices that you're making, whether they're good for your body or whether they're not good for your body, and always balance that out.
And part of therapy is to provide the client with healthy coping mechanisms. Sometimes they don't know what those coping skills are. Like you had said, journaling. Journaling is a very healthy way to cope because it's getting what's in here out, and that's what everybody is really trying to do, is to try to get it from here and to get it out. That's why a lot of cutters cut. They say that it's like cutting, and it's a way to get it out, to get the pain and to release the pain out. So when you can provide them with healthy coping strategies such as journaling, exercising, yoga, kickboxing, it gives them another outlet to be able to deal and to cope in ways that aren't self-harming.
Now, I'm going to go personal for just a minute, and I'm going to ask, what made you want to help victims of sexual abuse?
I can't say that I went into counseling strictly for that. Like most therapists, and I'm going to say most, not all, most therapists seek out becoming a counselor or psychologist to figure out their own issues, their own problems, the things that they've struggled with, and then in turn take what they've learned and help somebody else who is going through it. I know what you're leading at. Was I sexually molested? Yes, I was. I can't say that is the sole purpose that I went into therapy, but it definitely helps me when I'm working with sexual abuse victims because I can have empathy. I've been there. I've gone through a lot of the struggles that they're going through, the denial, the guilt, the shame. What did I do? It must have been something I did that they picked me. So I think that helps. And sometimes I disclose that with my clients, and it gives them a safe place to express it and say, oh, she knows, she's been there. She knows what that feels like. She knows what I'm going through.
So I want to be your counselor for just a minute. No, I'm just kidding.
I've been through my therapy. Most counselors are required, they highly recommend before you become a therapist to go through your own therapy to make sure that you have dealt with and addressed with any issues that you may have. Otherwise, like we talked about the transference, if you haven't dealt with your own personal issues, when you're in that therapeutic relationship, you can transfer some of your junk and stuff that you haven't processed and worked through onto your client, which is called transference, and you're not supposed to do that. You're there for the client, not for your own. You should have already worked through your...
I love that thank you for sharing that with us. You see, many times when they're behind the camera, they're looking up here like we got it all together. They don't realize that we've walked the same path, we've stepped in the same shoes. And to become a true survivor and be able to take a past and be able to help someone else grow from their pain is really, really being able to take back your power over your life and become a true survivor.
And it lets them know, well, she got to the other side. She's dealt with it. She's now a counselor. She's got, her life okay. Not perfect. Nobody's life's perfect. But it gives them a sense of hope that somebody worked through that and got to the other side.
A role model, a mentor, a leader, a confidant. Yeah, so many wonderful things. When we start to look at people and not profile them like they come from poverty, or, we tend to categorize people. If we would stop doing that and just look at people as we all have a past, we all have some sort of pain, and look at those that are helping others to overcome theirs, what a wonderful, beautiful place that it would be. So thank you for sitting down with me today.
No problem.
And you were so nervous.
Yeah, I don't like to do this.
You did such a great job.